Today I celebrated my brother's birthday, and he's turning 29 years old. As an astrologer, I know that 29 is one of the most important years of your life because we have what's called a Saturn return. No matter who you are, no matter where you are in the world, everyone at 29 years old will be able to think back to that time and pinpoint a significant life event. When I was 29, I got married and had a baby. So at my brother's birthday, I did a little bit of questioning my family members to see what happened to them when they were 29. My mother also, at 29, got married to my dad and had a baby, me. My dad at 29 bought his first house. My sister at 29 bought her first house. So that's kind of just crazy. The biggest thing, and the reason why I'm on here doing this video, is because I had a kind of revelation, I guess, while I was sitting there questioning everyone. And it was such a big revelation that I just wanted to immediately tell everybody that I knew, but nobody that I know will get as excited about this as me because I'm an astrology nerd and my friends are not, my family is not, and so they just don't get it. But I know some of you guys on here will totally get it. So I'm just going to take you down my story and maybe someone will get excited with me. So when I was 29, I got married and had a baby. My dad was in the hospital. It was the very first time he was ever in the hospital in his entire life. And he was going through all of these stomach issues. Long story short, my dad was actually at my wedding, but he was very, very skinny. He had lost 40 pounds. Saturn speaks to the father, so I knew that my dad was also having some kind of Saturn cycle, but I think I felt like it was just my Saturn, part of my Saturn story, because my dad was in the hospital. My dad was sick, which was part of my Saturn karma somehow. Well, today we were talking about everything, and he was like, do you guys know why I was in the hospital having stomach problems during that time? And I was like, no, I don't know. What he said completely shocked me. And this was the aha moment. He said, when I was 17 years old, I got an ulcer from my dad yelling and screaming and stressing me out. His dad was very verbally abusive. All these years later, something happened with the ulcer. It ruptured or something. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't have all the medical details. He explained it to me, but I wasn't listening because I was just so fascinated that this story was connected to his dad. And however many years later, the ulcer did something that affected him so severely it put him in the hospital. So I was having a Saturn cycle. My dad was having a Saturn cycle. And my dad's Saturn cycle stemmed from past karma from his dad. So we have 3 generations of karmic shit that came up during my Saturn return. Saturn speaks to the father. Again, Saturn speaks to stress, hardships, can even be sickness, famine, that kind of stuff. Saturn speaks to karma, lessons. And so I thought it was so crazy that at 17 years old, my dad endured so much strain, mental heartache, and he never did anything about it. He never said anything. He said, when he was telling the story, he said my dad was just so abusive And he said he would just like sit there and scream at me and talk shit to me. And he said I never said anything. And I never seen my dad do this before. And he went like this. He said, I just sat there like this and took it. And he like went into a shell, and he cowered when he spoke about his father and the mental verbal abuse that he endured. So anyway, I just thought that was pretty crazy. And then the last thing that was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is definitely like my dad was going through a Saturn cycle at this time. My dad was 17 when he got the ulcer. 49 years later, my dad is 70 right now. 49 years later, when he was 65, during my Saturn return, and during the time my dad was in the hospital, the stress and the heartache and all the stuff from internal that he had dealt with his whole life that he never talked about and acknowledged even came up to the surface during that time. And if you take 49 and you divide it by 7, because Saturn comes in sevens, every 7 years we have a Saturn cycle, you get what number? So this was undoubtedly a Saturn cycle, and it was just crazy for me to see my family karma literally play out from, 3 generations. It was my Saturn return. My dad was having a Saturn cycle, and it stemmed like from his dad.